No. That's really like, as they're walking in, we gotta get out of this place, just as they're coming in. It's a little subliminal.
Hi, friend.
We're going back to our original plan.
What's the original plan? I wasn't here.
Shalom Aleichem.
What was the second plan?
Did she call an audible hallelujah?
Oh.
This is why I don't wear jackets.
It's just Thanksgiving. That's why I feel bad.
You want to accompany me? You guys want to accompany me for Thanksgiving for the Friday night
Friday
next
night
week?
Thanksgiving.
I'm not gonna be in town.
Okay, that's fine. Same with you. Okay, it's fine. It's
Now, if I
absolutely
was here, I would definitely.
Yeah.
I gotta talk to you.
Good. That's great.
I mean, maybe Ed can come.
That's fine. That's good.
Good.
Because it's a long stretch. It was 4 hours.
La, la, la. La, 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 la. La, la. La, 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 la.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Hey. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to our Zoomiverse friends. We're glad you're here with us. Welcome to our band. Yay, band! Joining us for Tefillah tonight. Welcome, Rabbi.
Welcome, Cantor.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. We begin on page 24. Join us. Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leshalom, Boachem leshalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni, Baruchuni leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitchem leshalom, Tzeitchem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
The other day, my son Lev learned this new concept in school, and he's been asking me about it for the past couple days, actually. He points at the moon, which is, at this point, closer to full than to not. I think the full moon might actually be yesterday or today. But for the past week, he's been looking at the moon, and because it's not waxing, right? Because it's not waning, because it's waxing, he's been pointing at it and saying, it's a full moon. And I keep saying to him, no, not yet, soon. And as time has moved forward, he's actually watched, because for the first time at 3.5, he's able to pay attention to this, the moon getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger until it culminates. But what that means is because it's the full moon of Kislev, Hanukkah's right around the corner. And one of the cool things about Hanukkah is that it doesn't conform to the rest of Jewish holidays. Most Jewish holidays are in the middle of the month. They're right at the full moon, right? Think about things like Passover, things like Sukkot, or they're at the beginning of the month. Think of things like Rosh Hashanah. There are occasionally ones that don't conform. Shavuot, for example, is the 6th day of a month. But Hanukkah is intentionally placed at the end of the month. It's placed there because as the 25th of a month, you find that the moon is a sliver and gets even more of a sliver as Hanukkah moves forward, until you find that more and more light of your menorah is lighting the darker and the darker sky. And so as we kind of exist in a world that is growing darker and darker and darker, we realize that at this season, adding light to the darkness in the same way that Hanukkah does is all the more important. And even when Hanukkah doesn't roll around, we luckily each week have the Shabbat candles to do just that. And so tonight, as we light these Shabbat candles, just as we light our Hanukkah candles, we bring a little bit more light into what feels, at least through the seasons, like an ever-darkening world. And so with that, we're going to turn to page 2 and 3, and we're going to call Lucas up, who together with Oliver tomorrow are going to become B'nai Mitzvah. So I'm going to call him up with his family as we turn to page 2 and 3 and prepare to light our candles.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Wow, it's a Shabbat miracle. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
We're going to turn to page number 5 as we prepare to join together in Kiddush. Come stand with me over here. Pick it up. And we'll say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagaf. And
Amen.
together.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'v'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh b'reishit ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava u'v'ratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mikadesh haShabbat. Ceremonial sip for us, please, Lucas.
All right.
Yishar
Shabbat
koach. Well done. We
shalom.
got the thumbs up on the wine, too.
And
See
we're
you in the
excited to
morning.
celebrate with you tomorrow. As together we turn to the singing of Lecha Dodi. We are on page number 20.
לך לך דודי, לקראת לקראת קלה, בני פני שבת נקבלה. לך לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, הישמענו אל המלחם, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם כל תפארת ולתחילה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו וללכה, כי מקור הברכה מראש בקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Verse 5. התעוררי, כי בורכו מאורי, אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדון מלך נקרא. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
We rise together, verse number 9.
בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצלה, תוך אמונה מסגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
We remain standing as we turn to page 28 for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch et Adonai
Hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai, together.
Baruch Adonai Hamevorach
Leolam Be seated. Baruch et Adonai Hamevorach. Baruch et Adonai Hamevorach. Baruch Adonai Hamevorach. Leolam vaed. Baruch Adonai Hamevorach. Leolam vaed. One last time, sing out. Baruch et Adonai Hamevorach. Baruch et Adonai Hamevorach.
We're on page 30. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time, and changes the seasons and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzifaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Page 32.
אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו וקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם לפעם, כי הם חיינו ביום ימינו, ובהם נגה יומם ולילה, נגה יומם ולילה. באהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו
Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Page 36.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Top of page 39. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there's a better place, a promised land that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Page 40.
Ya ida ida ya la la, ya ida 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 la la la, ya la la la, ya la la, ya ida ya la la la. La mi chamocha bailim Adonai, join us. Mi chamocha bailim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh. Nora zehirot osef elev, Nora zehirot osef elev. Malechutecha ra'u v'anecha, ukeyaya לפני משה ומרים, זה אלי, אנו ואמרו, זה אלי, אנו ואמרו.
Let's hear you.
אדוני ימלו לעולם ועד. אדוני ימלו לעולם ועד. One more time, ya 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 la ya ya la la ya 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 la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la ya la la ya la la ya la la ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני
We're on page 42, though I'll invite you to turn your eyes to the screen as we join in both the traditional and a creative rendition of this next prayer.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ושמור צאתנו Sometimes I lay under the moon and I thank God I'm breathing, and I pray don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't more fight no more, there'll be no more, that the children will play.
Let's hear you. One day.
One day.
One day.
One day. One day.
One day.
One day. One day. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים.
In a moment, we're going to turn to page 46, and after this opening meditation, asking God to open up our lips, we'll move in silence through page 64. You could either pray the traditional words on the page or whatever words are in your heart, as together we rise for our silent Amidah. Adonai Sifatai Tiftach Ufi Yagi Tehilatecha.
I invite you to continue praying. And for those who feel like they've prayed what they need to pray, I invite you to take inspiration and just rest here another moment longer as we pray together for shleimut, for wholeness, and for the peace that comes when we finally find the right size for it all. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol Shalom, ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. V'tov be'enecha livarech et Amecha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב ישראל עמך
tasim leolam. Tasim leolam.
At this point in our service, we join together on page 253, and we have this opportunity, as we just did, to pray for peace, but to pray for that wholeness for people that are in need of healing. And I'll look around the room in a moment, and I'll ask you to join out loud, if you'd like to add the names of those people that you are specifically praying for, and then we'll focus at the screen and see a list and also join together. Mishaberak avotenu vimotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech et hacholim. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. This is your time.
Judy Kaplan, Todd Behrens.
May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. And let us say, Amen.
Mikor habracha l'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mikor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. The first rated R movie that I ever saw was a movie called Speed. And look, it was rated R because of violence. It was rated R probably because of language. And I must have seen this movie at this point multiple times. In fact, it's a joke between Ayala and I, that line after the character who I actually think is now one of the recurring characters on Succession, when he's sitting there in the bus, and the bus is moving around, and they end up going to the airport, and he's bummed that he didn't get to see more of LA, and he says, but I've already seen the airport. That joke has become kind of an endemic joke in our house as well. Anytime that we go back to the airport because we've forgotten something, or there's a problem with the car that we rented or anything like that. But I found myself reflecting a little bit on the last scene in Speed. Now, if you've seen the movie, there's a terrorist who decides that he's going to blow up a bus if the bus ever gets below 60 miles an hour. And so everybody's on the bus, and they figure out a way to get everybody off the bus and to save basically everybody's life. But the funny thing about the movie is that they use that conceit for the last couple scenes of the movie as well. But instead of a runaway bus, you end up with a runaway train. And so after Keanu Reeves saves the day, and after the train has now jumped the tracks, basically spilling on to the streets of San Francisco, he ends up kind of on the floor with his love interest, and the two of them start to kiss. And the last scene is her turning to him and saying, you know, relationships after traumatic events, they never last. And he smiles at her, and then they continue kissing. And the camera pans out, and that's the end of the movie, basically. Relationships after traumatic events never last. Change after traumatic events never lasts. That, in fact, is the big fear for all of us. And it's a fear that is manifest, actually, in this week's Torah portion. The Torah portion begins with Jacob, who is about to be reunited with his brother. He stole from his brother's birthright and his blessing, and he ran away, eventually getting married and creating a tribe among himself, right? 12 sons and a daughter. And he hears that his brother is basically down the street, kind of across the river. And that next day, he's going to meet his brother. And so Jacob sends his whole family across and basically sits and meditates by himself. And while he's there on that side of the Yabbok River, some strange being comes and starts to wrestle with him. Now, it's not clear who that being is. It might be God. It might be an angel. It might be his inner demons. It might actually be Esau himself. He hasn't seen Esau in 20 years. Maybe he doesn't recognize him. But in that moment, in that wrestling, he gets a new name. He takes that being and he kind of gets the being in a headlock. And the being looks and sees that the sun is coming up, and he says to him, I gotta go, for the sun is breaking. The dawn is breaking. And he says, I will not let you go until you bless me. And so the being turns to him and he says, your name shall no longer be Jacob, which means heel, because he was holding on to his brother's heel out of utero, trying to pull him back in. Instead, your name shall be Yisrael, he who wrestles with God. Now that should be the final story, but it's not. In fact, actually, after he meets Esau, after they reunite, after they part ways, it takes a while before God appears to him again. And God says in that moment, Jacob, Jacob, twice, in the way that God is wont to do when God is going to say something really important to somebody. And God reminds Jacob in that moment, toward the middle to end of our Torah portion, remember, your name is no longer Jacob. It is Yisrael. Now it's interesting that God calls him Jacob in order to remind him that God changed his name. And throughout the course of the rest of Jacob's life, Jacob is consistently referred to inconsistently. Sometimes Jacob is Jacob, and sometimes Jacob is Yisrael. And by the way, even in our Torah, even in our prayers, Jacob is called inconsistently. If you notice, there are other characters who get new names in the Torah. Sarah gets a new name, Abraham gets a new name. But in our Amidah, that prayer that you just recited silently, we call Abraham by his new name. We call Sarah by her new name. We don't call Abraham Avram and Sarah Sarai as they do in the beginning of their lives. Instead, they get the title, the moniker of their new name. But notice, we don't call our patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Yisrael. We call it Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That even within our prayers, we're called the children of Israel. That's the name of the Jews. But yet Jacob somehow keeps the name Jacob. Because in a way, traumatic events are not the best thing to lead to change. Trauma almost always resorts back in its own laziness to the world in which birthed the trauma. Just as relationships after traumatic experiences don't normally last, change after traumatic experience does not normally last. It's the downfall of our society. It's the downfall of human nature. That after a traumatic event, we like to see the change coalesce. We believe that change will coalesce. Jacob had the trauma of fighting whatever he was fighting that night, whether it was God or the angel or the being. But in a way, because trauma is not a good leader to change, you find that our tradition is inconsistent with the change that comes from it. That Jacob's new name needs, by the way, a second coalescing in God coming back to remind Jacob that his name is actually Israel. And even after that, we're not consistent. We have been through any number of traumas as a society, as a people, and we like to think that trauma has caused change. And just as with Jacob, trauma does cause change in the short term. I think all of our lives felt like they were fully transformed, our perspectives fully transformed after COVID hit. Only to realize, as I look around at the lives of our members, that many of us are going back to the old habits that we used to. Workaholics, people who have trouble prioritizing, people who over calendar themselves. That the kind of way that you thought that your life was going to turn out when COVID first hit, you realize actually that the trauma didn't birth very much other than a desire that is unmet to go back to some of the learnings that you had in the first place. The same, by the way, with racial justice. The traumas of spring and early summer of 2020, right? That was meant to be a wake-up call to America to take racial justice more seriously. And maybe we did a little bit. But that spirit, that fire of making a change and speaking out toward justice, that was short-lived. And many of us have gone back to our old routines. Many of us have gone back to our old causes. And many of us have forgotten the fire that was lit in us during that time period. A fire that is so easy to lose when you have days like today with Kyle Rittenhouse, and as we're looking anxiously on to the case of Ahmaud Arbery. We can pick almost any issue, whether it's a major storm to help us pay attention to climate change, whether it's an election that doesn't go our way so that we can realize what it's like to have voter disenfranchisement. Thank you. It's a tongue twister. Whatever the issue is, it is easy to be lost if it's couched in the era of a trauma, if it's couched in a major event, because it's slippery. It is easily lost. It is as fickle as the relationship laying down next to that train on its side on the San Francisco hills at the end of Speed. So what do we have to do? We have to take a page out of God's book. We have to, after the trauma has settled, after we are done, after Jacob is probably no longer limping from the injuries that he got from fighting that angel, we need to reappear and we need to re-engage with the things that mattered to us after the trauma itself. We have to remind ourselves about the learnings of COVID. We have to remind ourselves of the importance of racial justice, or the importance of gun control, or the importance of taking care of our environment. It has to be a constant refrain with reminders over and over so we do not lose the thread. Trauma cannot be the thing that informs our change, because if we do, we will move to the next trauma and the next trauma, and we will have an issue du jour. But if we pay attention and we come actively toward that change in the way God reapproaches Jacob with it, we're going to find that despite the fact that there's going to be things that are going to pull at us, despite the fact that steps forward and steps backwards lead to inconsistencies in the same way that Jacob's name is inconsistent in our tradition. At least it will matter to us. It will not be forgotten. So whatever that issue is, after whatever that trauma is that lights you, that engages you, you must find a way to keep it in your consciousness. And when you begin to forget and when society begins to forget, you must bring it up again. It's not in the trauma that change coalesces. It's in the quiet. And in the quiet, when you make it forefront in your mind, only then will it penetrate your heart. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to turn to page 282 as we rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. Our thoughts now turn to those that we've loved and who we've lost. This Shabbat, as I call the name of your loved one, I'll invite you to rise. And if you're at home, I'll invite you to put any names into the chat for which you are thinking. This Shabbat, we remember the following individuals: Judy Adler, Morris Appel, Solomon Beck, Sybil Berkowitz, Maxwell Berkowitz, Harold Berlin, Arnold Milton Bloom, Lillian Buckbinder, Neil Chilton, Regina Cohen, David Deitch, Dorcas Dorow, Abraham Ehrlich, Claudette Pfeffer, Celia Fish, Joan C. Gary, Fanny Goldsticker, Tilly Goodwillig, Bertha Gordon, Ruth Hendler, Clemens Henley, Herman High, Oscar Hilfman, Blanche Hochberg, Lenora Jans, John Janulis, Carl Johnson, Cade Johnson, Hannah Johnson, Nathan Camp, Thomas Camp, Austin Camp, Leonard Katowitz, Oscar Samuel Katz, Francis Katz, Bill Keels, Stuart Kalinsky, Aid Kushner, Leon Mello, Sophie Menkes, Vernon Menkes, Seth Michelle, John David Mizalko, Rachel Nailbuff, Nathan Newman, Dorothy November, Rhoda Pressman, Abraham Aaron Reback, Florence Rosansky, Maurice Rubin, Milton Sapir, Sidney Savitt, Tobias Chaffetz, Elsa Schmeyer, Elizabeth Shanzo, Gladys Schucker, Salim Sofer, Inga Strauss, Helen Teresa Wolkoff, Norman Saul Zukoff. And those who are in their Shiva and Shloshim periods of mourning: Robert Guelb, father of Neil Guelb, father-in-law of Sue Guelb; Leonard Vest, uncle of James Vest; David Sarlin; brother of Don Sarlin. Irving Berner, father of Alan Berner. Our beloved member Phyllis Berman. Carmela D'Agostino, mother of Mary D'Agostino. I'll also invite anybody who is observing a yard site that might not have been on this list to rise and share their name, or anybody within their 1-year period of mourning.
Marsha Reitman.
We rise together. Page 294. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon v'yamachon v'chayet l'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ulamei almaya, yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitnaran v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'rechu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, Damiram bi'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al ko Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'romav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al ko Yisrael v'imru amen. Please be seated. So before we move into our closing song, which will be Biado, and it'll be a slide up on the screen, a few announcements. We had a really full calendar over the next few weeks. I'm going to run through just a few quick things, and I know I'll forget things, so please look on your e-blasts and the website for lots and lots of things going on. So tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. is our tot service. 10 a.m., there are actually two services. Our lay-led casual minyan will be in the chapel, and we will be here at 10 a.m. also with services led by the cantor and I in celebration of Lucas and Oliver becoming B'nai Mitzvah, and so we wish their families a big mazel tov. For the rest of the weekend, there's any number of things going on, 3 actually on Sunday, one on Saturday night and 2 on Sunday. So Saturday night is our service for trans lives, which we always do with the other churches and synagogues and mosques in the Montclair area, and that's actually going to be at B'nai Keshet. That's at 6 p.m.
5:30.
Thank you, 5:30 at B'nai Keshet. And then Sunday, we have both the turkey ride, and if you want to do that, I'm going to be doing the first few miles of it before I peel off to go teach in religious school, but it's a really great way to make sure that there are enough turkeys. You ride to ShopRite, buy a turkey, and then and bring it over to the Human Needs Food Pantry for those at Thanksgiving.
Yep.
And then also it's our vendor sale. So if you still have shopping you need to do, we have I think like 20-something vendors coming. We're setting up a big tent. It's going to be in our parking lot on Sunday, and you can go and do some shopping, and it's also kind of doubles as a fundraiser for Shoresh. So it's going to be great, and you should definitely come
Good
and
stuff.
check that out. After that, a ton of other stuff happening. Monday night is our Interfaith Thanksgiving service with the kind of 2 religious communities that we tend to work with, Brookdale Reformed Church and Peace Islands Institute. So Christian, Jewish, Muslim. We'll be singing songs and reflecting on what Thanksgiving means in our respective
Yep.
traditions, and it's here at 7:30. And then after Thanksgiving, we find ourselves on Hanukkah. So we've got different lightings every night for different ages. The culminating point is going to be on that Friday night, where we're going to welcome Shimon Smith, who's a really talented Israeli musician who happens to be moving to the area, and we get to hear his music and sing with him. 2 other events happening that you should definitely mark your calendars for. On the 7th, which is a Tuesday night, we have a really exciting program happening here. We're going to be showing the movie Shared Legacy, which talks about the work of the 1960s between Jews and African Americans to work toward justice, and talk about the work that has been a shared legacy moving forward. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with religious leaders, with the director of the film, hosted by the Forward's own and our own Jody Rudoran, all about kind of where do we go from here, right? What does African-American Jewish partnership look like today? Knowing, by the way, that I'm drawing a dichotomy, but there are plenty of African-American Jews that are part of our community as well. And then on the 12th, a program that I think I might be the most excited for this program out of any program that we are doing. We have a scholar coming in who happens to be a Talmud scholar, but he happened as a side project to write a book on the spirituality of Bruce Springsteen's lyrics. And so he's coming in, and we have 4 songs that he's kind of talking about the lyrics and what they mean to Bruce Springsteen, to understanding God, all of that. And we have a combo that is being headed actually by our own Bob Melman, with different singers singing each of the different songs. And
That's
so
right,
it's
but
gonna be-
spoiler alert, there will be crowd participation,
Okay,
at least in one song.
yes.
So,
So it's really cool.
crowd
participation.
participation.
Yeah, at the vendors.
Holiday sale.
Fair market thing. You can also purchase a cookbook if you haven't already done that. And it's a fundraiser for us, and there's over 300 pages in it with lots of recipes. Don't even think I really cook all the ones that are in there.
Oh.
Because, I mean, it's one of those things. But you can get your cookbook, place your order, and you'll have it in time for
I'll say that announcement for those who joined us virtually so you can hear what that announcement was. The cookbook is going to be available as well at the vendor sale, and so make sure to pick one up. So with that, look, we got a ton of other stuff happening too, but I think that's enough to digest for now. We're going to join together on that final song on the slide, Biado, into your hand, O God, we give our soul.
בית אישן ויעירה ואם רוחי גוויעתי אדוני ולא יירא ואם רוחי גוויעתי אדוני once more. My soul I give to my spirit in your hand. I shall not fear.
Adonai velo ira. Adonai li velo ira. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.